Welcome back to another episode of the Higher Ed Podcast. I'm your host, Kumar D. Jarnett. I'm flying solo today, at least on the engine side. I've got a great guest with us today. Dr. Lillian Schumacher is here. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. How are you doing today?
I am phenomenal. Second podcast of the day. I'm energized, ready to have, great stimulating conversation. Um, could you just kind of maybe let our audience know who you are? How'd you become so successful in the higher ed space? What's your origin story?
Thank you. Yes, happy to do that. Thank you for that opportunity. I'm Lillian Schumacher. I'm president of Tiffin University. We're located in Tiffin, Ohio, which is in northwest part of the state of Ohio, about an hour and a half from Detroit, Columbus, and Cleveland in those respective area directions. Rural area, and we're an institution that's been around since 1888, and we have about 37, almost 3,800 students. About half of those students are traditional students, direct out of high school, coming to Tiffin University with some college credit, perhaps. But they participate in athletics and the performing arts. They live on campus, those traditional 18 to 21, 22-year-olds. And then the rest of the balance of that number is online or at a distance location. And so we have online programs at the bachelor's level, also at the graduate level in the master's area. And then we have two doctoral programs as well. One in criminal justice that we just launched this past fall. We have a doctorate of criminal justice. The other one is a PhD in global leadership and change. And we've seen great growth in all of our areas. We've been very, very fortunate to have enrollment growth in a time for higher ed that's been, needless to say, a little challenging.
Absolutely. I was just going to ask you because a lot of our guests right now, one of our hottest topics has been the enrollment cliff. But you're saying you guys are having success, with growth and kind of growing the population. How have you been able to achieve that?
Yeah, so it's a couple different things. In fact, I'm getting ready to write a white paper on this topic, right? Because you're always going to have headwinds or macro factors that are going to impact what you're doing in your organization or in your business. And there is indeed an enrollment cliff, right? I mean, the demographics are the demographics, and so one of the ways that we've been able to combat that is kind of a mixture of things. I think, we've been able to look at our institution internally through operations to say, how can we become more efficient and effective? We were talking a little bit before about artificial intelligence and how you use that as an opportunity to become more productive, right?
Sure.
Reduce some operational costs. And so we've done this combination of looking internally to say, how can we be more efficient in our process, right? Whatever the process is, enrollment, how can we be more efficient in allotting scholarships, right? What is that sweet spot of scholarship that is going to meet the needs of the student so that they come to Tiffin University and have a successful experience here? And we also manage our net tuition at the same time, right? So you manage that discount rate or your scholarshiping along with how much net tuition you're bringing in. And so it's kind of an art and science in terms of looking at your operations to say, how can you be more efficient? And so that takes people. It takes, a synergistic group of people that are coming to the table and are looking at that in real time and able to pivot and make decisions. So
Sure.
in that realm, we're doing a few things. We have modeling that our enrollment management team, which is our enrollment management team is phenomenal. I think that is very important that you have an enrollment team that understands the balance of the art and the science of this business and the whole funnel process and what that really means, and have the right team, the right structure in your enrollment team to be able to manage that. So we've done that. We've also then aligned that with our financial modeling to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable to this kind of sweet spot of matching, scholarships and net tuition revenue. So that's been one thing that we've done. The other thing is we're diversified in that we have traditional students, and that is where the demographic clip is hitting the most. But we also have a whole nother student population that's online, right? And is more the
Right.
adult student. And so in the online space, in our undergraduate programs, we have done some pretty creative things where we allow our traditional students to take an online class if they want to, because they're involved in athletics and it's going to help their schedule.
Sure.
because, what they're working and that's going to help. But then we also have this whole population that's an adult population
Yeah.
that they want, to get a degree because they want a promotion or they want to change careers or whatever the case may be for them. And so at the undergraduate level, a lot of our students are adult students that are in their career. They're working and they want to go to school at the same time. And
Got
then
it.
the graduate population, it tends to be the individuals that are continuing to work and want to climb the corporate ladder or the organizational ladder. And so, and then the doctoral programs are really more specialized for individuals that want to gain deep and broad expertise. Maybe they want to go into faculty or higher education and be teaching in a respective area. So the fact that we have a diversified student population really helps us um,
Sure.
well, to continue to grow in enrollment as opposed to, knock on wood, be flatter or decline in enrollment. So
Absolutely.
and it's not getting any easier. There's no doubt about that. But we've been able to figure that balance of that art and science and making sure that we continue to have diverse student pathways to recruit, retain, and graduate students from different varying demographics.
Absolutely. So when you say that and you're kind of, leading and servicing these kind of different demographics, does that change kind of how you recruit your staff, or do you have some type of development and leadership and coaching that kind of deliver to the staff so that they can handle the differing demographics?
It's a
If that's
great
fair.
question. Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is yes to both of those, right? So you have to have the right team that understands that in some cases, what is old is new again, but in some cases, what is old needs to remain old, and you need to make sure that you're doing some things very differently, right?
Sure.
And so, having a leader of your area that understands both of those pieces of the puzzle is very, very important. You can't recruit students the way you used to recruit students. I mean,
Mhm.
our students are very different. They're much more savvy in terms of higher education, what it offers, what they're looking for, all of those components, you have to adjust with that. And so I think the recruitment process has developed, has changed, and the leader of that area, it has to become their trade, their profession. They have to continuously learn in that area. So having the right people in the right seats is critically important. Making sure you bring in people then that understand that ability to do things differently, to maybe be a little non-conventional or unconventional in the way they are, or untraditional, I guess, in the way that they recruit. What part of our tagline is challenge conventional wisdom, and so that's a big
Sure.
part of who we are as an institution. And so think about things differently. Think about things creatively and innovatively, and do things a little bit differently. And so that's been what we've done. And then we do invest in our people. We want to invest in our people and we want to make sure they're getting the professional development that they need to be successful in their roles. And so we do all sorts of things. We have regular yearly in-house continuous education on a variety of topics, leadership, customer service, learning more about financial literacy and what students are coming to the institution needing to have removed as far as obstacles go with respect to financial literacy. And then we have an emerging group of leaders that we actually invest in, and we put them through a year-long leadership development program because we've selected them as kind of that
Nice.
next level of leaders. And so we
Sure.
want to make sure we're investing in their professional development and education so that we prepare them for those roles as they become available. So we do a combination of both.
Absolutely. Succession planning. I love it. So you kind of came in with kind of guns blazing with your introduction. So you took me away from one of the questions that we ask on every episode. Dr. Schumacher, when did you first fall in love with higher ed?
Oh, wow, that is a great question. It would have been around the year 1990.
Okay, okay.
All right. So I remember that vividly because um, I had graduated from college. I took a job in corporate America, and it was a great first job for me. I worked for a big Fortune 500 automotive company. Um, But it wasn't too long before I realized that I didn't feel a huge passion or affinity to the work I was doing or a
Sure.
calling, you know. And my own personal collegiate journey was wonderful. I loved it. I was one of these students that was involved in everything,
Okay.
loved living on campus and, just really, really enjoyed that collegiate journey. And so I didn't really realize you could have a career in this area until I started to talk to people and they say, absolutely, you can. And so my husband and I made a pretty bold decision. We were both working in the corporate world, but we both felt the same way. And we gave up very, very cushy, well paying jobs to follow our dreams and our passions to get
Sure.
into higher ed. Yeah, we
Wow.
as grad students and never looked back. It's been the best thing
Nice.
I've done. Yeah. So I've now been in this field for, the years start to blend together, 37 years.
Nice. Nice. Okay. So there's one thing to fall in love with higher ed. There's a whole other thing to fall in love with leadership in higher ed. Do you remember when you first fell in love with the leadership aspect of higher ed and what it could be?
So you were breaking up just a tiny bit. I don't know if it was on my end. I hope it wasn't our year end. I'm not sure. Could you repeat that again?
Sure. No, I said so. There's a difference between falling in love with just higher education, and then leadership in higher ed. Do you remember when you first fell in love with the leadership aspect or wanted to be a leader in higher ed?
Yeah, that's wow. These are excellent questions you're asking me today. Yes, and yeah, I do. You think about it. Um, I do. So I went. I was originally going to do the administrative leadership route, and then I
Sure.
decided about 8 years in that I wanted to be a faculty member. So I went that route, and so I
Okay.
got a doctorate and became a faculty member. And I loved being a faculty member. I loved it. I loved being with the students and in the classroom and all of that. I love the flexibility of the role and all of that. And in organizations in which I was serving, there were opportunities to kind of take that administrative track on the academic side. So to become a dean or a program director, or vice president, provost, all those types of things. And I had mentors that really encouraged me to do that. Right.
Sure.
And so I had never really thought when I got to the faculty position, I thought that's where I want to stay for the rest of my career.
Nice.
This is great. I love being with our students and teaching. But then when I started to talk to people that I respected and mentors that said, you have a doctorate in leadership studies. You study, you know what leadership is supposed to look like and what it's supposed to be. Why wouldn't you consider doing this? And really,
Sure.
people that I respected and trusted convinced me to start looking in these roles, into these roles. And so I did. And so, I became a program director and a chair of a department, and then became a dean of the business school, actually here at Tiffin University, and then kind of, climbed up there, vice president for academic affairs and provost. And then I had the opportunity to step into the role as a president. And so, do I want to say it was intentional? And once people started to talk to me about it, then I was like, yes, I can do this, right? I had worked with leaders that I had respected. I had also worked with leaders that I learned a lot from in terms of what not to do,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And so I thought, okay, this could be really significant and impactful if I had the opportunity potentially to lead in what I believed was the right way, the courageous way to lead. And so, but it was because of people that really encouraged me to do that.
Nice. Nice. Okay. All right. So, and I guess part of the reason to ask that or go down that line of questioning is because you are passionate about, leadership role, university president, right? What what do you feel are the competencies, that are needed for a successful university president today?
That's a really good question. I think, one of the things I believe in, one of the leadership frameworks that I believe in, is emotional intelligence. It's something that I studied in graduate school long ago and really have continued to make sure that I am involving myself in. So emotional intelligence is really a philosophy of how to lead, right? So it's this
Mm.
understanding of your own self first and foremost, and then the more self-aware you are, the better able you are to have effective, successful relationships with others, right? And then that in the workplace, that means with the people that you that you work with, the people
Sure.
that work on your team, et cetera, et cetera. So I really do believe that emotional intelligence is directly related to the leadership effectiveness of a president. And I believe that today's presidents need to have emotional intelligence. They need to have high levels of emotional intelligence because many of the competencies around emotional intelligence are things like empathy, right? But also things like social orientation and developing others and diplomacy and all these areas where you have to you know um, utilize different tools, different approaches to the way that you interact with people and the way you build relationships with people. And you think about the organizational environment of higher ed, you're working with faculty, you're working with students, you're working with parents, you're working with alumni, you're working with donors, you're working with your staff. And so it's really important that you understand how to meet people where they are when you're leading, right?
Right.
To me, it's very different than managing. It is very different. Leading is very different. And I think emotional intelligence gives us a really good framework for effective leadership. So high emotional intelligence is the first thing I think that effective college presidents have and understand. And then there are a whole bunch of things that I believe are tentacles of that. So, I do believe that presidents need um, to have a lot of enthusiasm, but that enthusiasm has to have the ability to create a vision and be able to execute on that vision. So it's important to be passionate. It is important to be excited. It is important to have presence because you're speaking, you want to get students excited, you want to get your employees excited, et cetera, et cetera. But you also have to be able to execute.
Yep.
So, I think, it's important that presidents have a vision, they have a plan, and they're able to talk about that plan, get people excited about that plan, that strategy, that focus area, but they're also able to execute on that, right? And if they themselves are more the visionary and not so much of the executor, they need to surround themselves with people that can do the execution part of it, right? So that things are actually happening and results are actually occurring. And so I think that ability to have that balance of vision and ability to execute is also very, very important. And the other thing is, I think you have to have a lot of empathy. I also think you have to have a lot of emotional self control, especially today when everybody has something to say about everything, right? Everything, whether it's, whatever it is, right? There's always, two sides of that very same coin. And so
Sure.
choosing how do you respond to that and not reacting, is really, really important. And so I think some of those and a competency, I think part of being able to sustain and showcase those competencies, even though this isn't directly a competency, I think presidents need to make sure that they have the, what do I want to say, the ability to take care of themselves. Okay. What I mean by
Right.
that is if they're going to be highly emotional intelligent, if they're going to be able to possess these competencies that are needed today in this very dynamic world and this dynamic role, they have to take care of themselves. So being able to know when to say no or take time for themselves, whether it's, mind, body, spirit, whatever they need to stay energized and to stay healthy, they need to make sure that they're taking care of themselves because if they don't, nobody else will. And so that's not necessarily the competency other than having the competency of discipline. Discipline to take care of yourself, I think is really, really important.
Sure.
The other thing, especially today with what's happening in higher ed and the consolidation that we're seeing in our industry
Yep.
with everything, right? Closures and all that other is we have to think outside of the box. And so that traditional way of leading institutions, we have to think very differently. We have to think about innovation. We have to think about how do we really deliver our education in ways that meets the needs and desires of today's students. I think that's really important. That may look different, right? So online education is a really good example of that. And if it's not degrees, it needs to be modules of competencies and certification development,
Yep.
right? Those types of things. Those are all things that presidents need to be thinking of. And so they need to be innovative. They need to be a little disruptive in the way that they are leading their organizations and think a little bit more like business.
Yeah.
Think a little bit more like business because although we are not for profits, most of us, we do still have to be effective, and we have to be financially sustainable. And so
Sure.
it's important that we think about it from that perspective.
No, that's great. That's great. Well, I guess when you think about like everything you just outlined, it should prepare you for the challenges and the opportunities as a university president. And everything's happening so much faster now than it was, right? I've read this book called Art of Worldly Wisdom, and it's one of those, maxim strategy books like Art of War and Japanese Book of Five Rings and things like that. But it's real little. It's a little book, but 300 maxims. And I remember when I first read it, the first maxim was everything is at its peak. And I was like, of all the maxims, like, why is this the first one? Like, I didn't get it. I was looking for something a little bit more profound. Machiavelli, was it better to be loved or feared, right? But I think over time, I realized that at every moment in the present, everything is more competitive than it's ever been in the past, right? And when I think about the higher ed space, it just really embodies that like everything is at its peak. AI, regulation, litigation, programs, jobs. I mean, and on. How do you, as a university president, prepare for the challenges and the opportunities? I mean, do you ever sleep?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So me personally, I have a hard time sleeping, right? Some presidents are better at that. This is just one of these things that is part of my DNA. But
Sure.
um, that's a really, really good perspective to offer, because it is important that presidents are able to sift through the noise and sift through everything coming at you, right? And not try to be everything to everybody. And so I
Sure.
think it's important that presidents are able to remind their stakeholders that this is our mission, this is our vision, and these are how our strategic priorities align with our mission and vision, right? And so as long as we can continue to align what we're doing. So if we've decided that, utilizing artificial intelligence as a tool in the classroom is something that our faculty want to do, we just need to make sure that we align with our mission and vision in utilizing artificial intelligence. So what does that mean? And then we have to sit down and decipher
Right.
what we mean when we say that. And so it means that we sift through all of the options, all of the opportunities, all of that, and then decide where are we going to focus, because you can't do everything. And maybe you put some things on the sideline for a while and you say, okay, we'll look at that next year, or we'll look at that the year after. But when you get into doing too much at one time, you're going to lose sight of your mission and lose sight of what you're doing. And if you can't measure what you're doing to see if it's successful, there's really no sake in doing it. So
Right.
it's important that a president has the ability to sift through, right? To sift through and prioritize, sift through and align, sift through and remind her team or his team that these are the priorities that we're focused on. That's what we are going to, work on now. And eventually we'll look at this or that. That's why strategic plans are so important, but strategic plans that are no more than 5 years, ideally 3 years, but 3 to 5 years, because those are stable yet flexible, right? Those are
Right.
it's a plan, it's a playbook that, depending on what's going on in the environment, things are going to change and maybe take a different turn, but not losing sight fully of what those priorities are.
Okay. No, awesome. Lastly, you gotta explain this to me, right? When you say how presidents can bloom within our planet
Oh,
and
yeah.
staying power. Yeah. How do you think about that? Help me understand that.
Oh, so I mean, I've had a lot of wise people that have given me that advice over the years. I think today, I think the statistic is somewhere to, 3 to 5 years at the most is kind of the longevity of a president today.
Sure.
These jobs are getting harder. A lot of the things that we've talked about, a lot of the dynamics, it's just a very, very tough job, but it's still a very rewarding job. And I have some amazing colleagues of mine, women in particular, that have written. There's one in particular. Her name's Joanne Soliday, who wrote. She was a founder of a company called Credo. She's retired now, but she wrote a book about thriving institutions. And her and her colleagues were working on a book more recently about staying power of presidents. And she really explains it like this, and this resonates with me. When you focus on staying somewhere, it's
Yep.
really important that you understand the chapters of your presidency. So a lot of presidents will say, okay, I'm going to go somewhere because I'm a fixer. So I'm going to go somewhere for
Right.
3 to 5 years. I'm going to fix it, and then I'm going to move on to the next institution because I want to fix that, right?
Right.
So then that's a great choice, and that's a great pathway for some people. And I will tell you that in my journey, I've thought about 10 years in this role. Have I done all I can possibly do? Should I be looking at another role at another institution? Because we have the opportunity to do that. And there have been several times that I've actually done that. But I've consciously made the decision to stay because after evaluation and self reflection and all of that, I still feel like there's more work to be done. And my team and I and my board have worked so hard to get our institution to where it is now. We have bloomed where we are planted, right? We've been able to,
Wow.
to really, really bloom where we've been planted. And a president told me that advice when I first became a president. Don't always focus on what's next or where you want to go next. Try to really, really bloom and grow where you're planted. And so that's resonated with me as I've thought about if I want to leave and go do this role somewhere else. When you're in an institution and an organization where you're seeing continuous growth, continuous enhancement, continuous transformation, um, think about how you as a president can form that next chapter of your presidency to keep you enthused, to keep you
Right.
engaged, to keep you energized. And that's what staying power and really, really thinking about what's next for your institution can allow you to do. And for me, I'm very fortunate because I have an amazing leadership team. And together, we've worked hard. I've worked hard to build this leadership team. And I want to stick with this leadership team because they're the ones that I believe can help us be even better than we are today. So we've
Sure.
gone from a really, really good institution to a much, much better institution. I believe we still have getting us to this great institution ahead of us. And it's not because we're not great now, but we just still have this opportunity and this momentum to take us to this next level. And that's what gives me the energy and the passion to stay.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I can't think of a better place to end it than right there. This is awesome. Are you working on a novel? Do you have Facebook, Instagram, anything you want to share with our audience? If so, now's the time.
I'll let you know, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn more than anything. That's kind of where I go. I am working on, I did a white paper earlier and working on another one, an editorial, and that'll be out on my LinkedIn page soon. And then there'll be more. So LinkedIn's probably the place to follow me.
Awesome. Okay. Well, listen, we'd love to have you back in the future to continue to learn and hear about the great things you're doing. And I already spoke to you earlier about potentially having you on the Everything Higher Ed podcast. So thanks a lot for your time, Dr. Schumacher. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Back at you. I really appreciate this. It's been great talking with you today. Thank you very
Abs-
much. All right.